Explain that one that's really fascinating on Tuckernuck with the headless
oh yes, right.
centipedes.
All right,
What?
millipedes.
Headless
All right,
millipedes.
now, okay, I'm sure your viewers know what a millipede is.
Yeah.
This is a
bug.
terrestrial, not a bug, it's not a bug.
It's not a bug?
It's a terrestrial invertebrate that
Okay.
bugs are,
Yeah.
millipedes have a lot of legs, millipede.
Yeah.
This goes back to the early Cretaceous period when they were 9 feet long. They're not quite that long on Tuckernuck, but they're bigger than any millipedes on Nantucket and on the mainland, with the exception of the same species in the wet forest of interior New England. By all rights, Narcissus annularis, the millipede in question, should not be on Tuckernuck, which is a scrubby, semi-dry island that doesn't have a lot of forest. But somehow it ended up there. And something has co-evolved with it to decapitate it. Now, millipedes, and especially this species, have chemical defenses. In this case, it's a chemical very similar to hydrogen cyanide. Now, they have this so as to deter acts of predation. You bite into this thing and, oh, there was a big mushroom.
It's going to be right up here on the right before the Tom Nevers Head Road.
Yeah.
Okay.
What is right? Just pull over?
Yeah.
You mean it's on the side of the road?
Yeah, it's beside the bike path right before the road starts.
Oh, okay.
Left or right?
Right.
So I'm just gonna where she's.
Well, up until we see, she said we could see mushrooms on the road.
I saw some right back there. I think they're agaricus, and if they are, we'll have something.
Okay,
something to talk
do I
about.
pull over after
Yes.
these front
Yes.
trees?
Yes. We'll have to get back
No,
to
there- wait,
those
they-
millipedes.
Yeah. I think I saw something back there. And
Is this okay, Larry?
this is okay, but I don't really. Apart from one I saw back there,
Can we?
She said it was right before the road begins.
but there were a couple big ones. I saw some things farther back.
Well, let's just walk.
Let's
around.
walk.
All right. Now we see those a lot, right?
We see them a lot. And this is an amanita. Genus has the deadliest mushrooms in the world. I'd have to look at it from a microscopic point of view to determine the species. I thought it was going to be agaricus, which is the cousin of the supermarket, the meadow mushroom, the button mushroom you get in the supermarkets. You would never get this in the supermarket unless you wanted to kill all your clients.
That would kill you?
I think this is probably one of the more toxic ones.
And what would kill you? You said not the head, but the stem?
No, both.
Both would do it.
Both would do it. What they have is called amatoxins that are, they have nothing to do with your stomach. They inhibit cell division, meaning they get into your stomach and they start getting into other areas like the kidneys. They shut down the kidneys, move to the liver, shut down the liver, and move to the lungs. Wow. This is a slow and very painful process that results in paroxysms, coma, and death.
How much would you have to eat for that?
They vary from specimen to specimen. It's like some have a really strong concentration of the toxins, some don't. But if this was typical, I would say this would be sufficient to kill a full-grown, otherwise healthy Republican. Could this be no? Okay. This may not be one of the more toxic amanitas, but you don't mess with amanitas. I'm going to take it back and identify it. It's one of 3 or 4 possibilities. It could be a very light-colored version of Amanita muscaria. I don't want to encourage people to eat any amanita, but there's one that is what we would call in the early 70s tripworthy.
Do they have them? They have them here, don't they?
Yeah.
I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah, but not that the kind you're thinking of grows in dung.
Right.
This doesn't grow in dung, and this is not truly psychedelic. It has different ingredients. It's not a psilocybe.
Do we have any of those sitting here that just for the sake of looking at them?
Unfortunately not.
You have to go into...
If you could explain why picking mushrooms is not the equivalent of picking rare wildflowers.
Right.
Okay.
It's like picking berries or picking apples on a tree. This is just the fruiting body.
Oh, it's still in there.
The mycelium, the important part, is right underground here. You don't want to mess with that. You don't want to build on that because that'll shut down the whole thing. The sole purpose of this is to send out spores. This is what would we call it? Well, equivalent of a sex organ, you could say. Each one of these, each day, probably drops 100,000 spores. They're microscopic. Of those 100,000, maybe 3 or 4 might end up becoming a mushroom. That's why it drops so many. If indeed each one became a mushroom, we would be knee-deep all around the planet in amanitas. I can speculate on the health of the environment based on the mushrooms. But as I said, the important part is underground rather than above ground. This just exists to send out spores, to repeat. But a healthy environment does have lots of mushrooms. And when people are using fungicides, pesticides on their lawn, they're destroying their lawn because the mushrooms are both degrading all the waste stuff in the lawn, and some of them are connected with surrounding plants and trees. That mycorrhizal relationship I think I was talking about earlier. What they're doing when they put fungicides and pesticides in their lawn, in addition to paving the way to possibly poisoning their own children, is destroying the habitat, slowly but surely.